Your weight still looks steady, and your routine hasn't really changed. Yet that same steady weight may already be hiding a deeper physical shift. For many adults in their late 50s, 60s, and early 70s, life feels mostly familiar. Meals happen at the usual times. Daily routines stay intact. The number on the scale looks reassuringly stable. And because that number hasn't moved, it's easy to assume the body hasn't changed either. Yet over time, certain moments begin to feel different. Climbing a familiar set of stairs seems to take more effort than it used to. Standing up from a chair feels slower, not painful, just heavier. Carrying groceries still gets done, but the effort lingers a little longer afterward. These experiences often get explained away as just aging. After all, nothing dramatic has happened. There's no sudden illness, no obvious injury, no clear warning sign demanding attention. But focusing only on weight or routine can quietly miss something important. Because while those signals stay the same, the body may already be responding differently underneath. There is a form of physical change that doesn't show up on the scale. It doesn't always appear in basic checkups either. It begins subtly while life still looks normal from the outside. This is why two people can eat similarly, live similarly, and weigh about the same, yet feel very different in their bodies as the years pass. The difference often shows up first in how effort feels, not in numbers. If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. Many older adults notice these shifts long before they have a reason to worry or even a word to describe what's happening. Staying with this idea for a moment can help explain why the same habits that once felt supportive may begin to feel less effective over time. What makes this kind of change easy to overlook is that it doesn't always feel like weakness. Many people can still lift the same objects, walk the same distances, and keep up with daily responsibilities. On the surface, strength seems intact, but the difference often shows up afterward. The task gets done, yet the body feels more drained than it used to. Recovery takes longer, and even short rests no longer feel as refreshing as they once did. This is because muscle plays a role far beyond visible strength. It supports how the body handles everyday demands, how steady movement feels, and how quickly energy returns after effort. When muscle quietly declines, those systems don't fail all at once. They simply become less efficient. That inefficiency can feel subtle at first. Standing up from a chair requires a bit more focus. Carrying a box across the room feels manageable, but the arms stay heavy afterward. An afternoon walk still happens, though the legs feel less responsive near the end. These moments rarely raise concern because nothing feels broken. There's no clear line where one can say, this is when it started. Instead, the body begins asking for more effort to do the same work. For many older adults, this shift becomes noticeable in how the day unfolds. Energy seems to fade earlier than it once did. Tasks that used to flow together now need small pauses in between, not because of pain, but because the body feels less buffered against routine stress. This is why muscle loss is best understood as a foundational change, not a short-term problem. It affects how the body absorbs effort, manages fatigue, and rebounds afterward. Long before someone feels truly weak, the body may already be adapting to having less reserve. Once that idea settles in, everyday experiences start to make more sense. Many people assume this kind of muscle change begins much later in life, often after 70, yet for a large number of adults, the earliest signs appear years before that assumption ever comes to mind. It often starts when routines are still steady. The same walks, the same household tasks, the same schedule from week to week. Nothing feels out of place at first, which is why the shift is easy to miss. What changes is not the habit itself, but how the body responds to it. A familiar activity begins to feel slightly heavier. The effort required feels a bit higher, even though the movement hasn't changed. This is because muscle loss doesn't arrive suddenly. It develops gradually, often beginning in midlife, while strength still seems good enough. At that stage, the body compensates quietly, asking for more effort to maintain the same output. For many adults in their 50s and early 60s, this shows up as fatigue rather than weakness. Energy seems to run out sooner in the day. Tasks that once flowed together now feel better spaced apart. Because the change is slow, it rarely feels urgent. The mind adjusts along with the body, accepting the new effort level as normal. Over time, that adjustment can mask how much reserve has already been lost. What matters here is timing. When these shifts go unnoticed for years, the pace of change tends to increase with age. The body adapts less easily, and the margin for recovery grows thinner. Noticing when effort begins to rise, even subtly, can quietly reframe how one understands aging itself. This is where many people feel confused. They haven't started eating more, portion sizes look familiar, meals feel reasonable, and habits around food haven't changed much. Yet, over time, energy feels lower, and the body seems quicker to store weight in places it didn't before. Strength feels less reliable, even without any clear change in appetite. What often goes unrecognized is the quiet role muscle plays in everyday metabolism. Muscle isn't only there for movement. It acts as a major workspace where the body handles fuel from food. When you eat, especially carbohydrates, that energy needs somewhere to go. With more muscle available, the body has a larger, more flexible space to handle that fuel smoothly. When muscle gradually declines, that space quietly shrinks. The result isn't dramatic at first. The same meal now feels heavier afterward. Energy doesn't rebound as easily. Small fluctuations in eating seem to have a bigger impact than they once did. This can show up in subtle ways during the day. A morning that once carried you through until lunch now feels shorter. An afternoon dip arrives earlier, even when sleep and meals feel unchanged. It's not that the body suddenly stopped working, it's that the system has less buffer than before. With less muscle supporting daily energy use, the margin for flexibility becomes thinner. That's why two people can eat the same breakfast and feel very different by mid morning. One feels steady and alert, the other feels slightly sluggish, even though nothing obvious went wrong. Understanding this connection helps explain why changes in body composition can happen quietly without overeating or major lifestyle shifts. The body is responding differently even when the inputs look the same. And once that response begins to shift, everyday choices start carrying more weight than they used to. This is where many people begin to feel quietly frustrated. They're eating what seems like a reasonable amount of protein, meals look balanced, habits feel familiar, and nothing appears obviously lacking. Yet strength doesn't hold the way it once did. Energy feels harder to maintain. The body doesn't seem to use food the same way it used to. This experience has a name, though the idea itself is very simple. As we get older, muscle becomes less responsive to the signals it once answered easily. The same meal that supported strength 10 or 15 years ago no longer produces the same effect. Think of it like a conversation that used to be clear. Food sends a message to the muscle saying, "Here's what you need." Earlier in life, that message was heard immediately. Over time, the volume drops, even though the words stay the same. This doesn't mean food has lost its value. It means the body now needs a clearer, more intentional signal to respond. Without that signal, protein may still be eaten, but less of it gets directed toward maintaining muscle. Many older adults notice this without realizing what's happening. They keep eating the same breakfast they always have. They keep preparing familiar dinners. Yet the results slowly drift in a different direction. That's why simply eating more often doesn't solve the problem. The issue isn't quantity alone. It's how effectively the body responds to what's already there. When muscle becomes less sensitive, it takes more precision for the same nourishment to reach its intended destination. Until that shift is recognized, effort can feel mismatched to outcome. And once that mismatch sets in, it changes how everyday habits quietly add up. This is where everyday eating habits quietly come into focus. Many meals look complete on the plate, yet the body doesn't seem to benefit the way one would expect. A common pattern starts early in the day. Breakfast is often light, sometimes just toast, fruit, or coffee. It feels easy, gentle on the stomach, and familiar from years of routine. But without enough protein in that first meal, the body begins the day already undersupported. By lunchtime, habits tend to repeat themselves. A sandwich, soup, or salad feels sufficient, especially when appetite is modest. The meal fills the stomach, but it may not send a strong enough signal to the muscles that are quietly waiting for direction. Then comes dinner. This is where many people place most of their protein. A larger portion, eaten in the evening, feels logical and satisfying, yet the body can only work with so much at one time. When protein is concentrated into one heavy meal, much of it simply doesn't get used the way people expect. The system isn't inefficient because something is wrong. It's responding to timing and distribution. Another subtle shift comes from convenience. As schedules simplify, foods that are quick and easy naturally take priority. Packaged options feel practical, especially when cooking for one or two. Over time, these choices may crowd out higher quality sources without it being obvious. None of these habits feel unusual. They develop slowly, shaped by comfort, appetite, and convenience. And because meals still feel filling, it's easy to assume they're doing their job. The gap appears not in fullness, but in how the body responds afterward. When people think about foods that support strength as we age, sardines often come to mind. They're familiar in health conversations, and many people recognize them as a thoughtful choice. But there's another food that quietly deserves attention. It's likely already in your refrigerator. It's used often, yet rarely considered in this context. Eggs tend to be seen as simple, even ordinary. They're part of breakfast routines, quick lunches, or easy dinners. Because they're so familiar, it's easy to overlook what they offer when the body begins responding differently to food. What makes eggs interesting isn't novelty. It's how consistently the body seems to recognize and work with them. For many older adults, meals that include eggs feel more grounding, more sustaining, without feeling heavy. This isn't about replacing one food with another. Sardines can still have a place at the table. What's notable is that eggs fit easily into daily life across different meals without requiring a change in routine. That familiarity matters. When food feels approachable, it's more likely to be used regularly. And regularity is often what quietly shapes how the body responds over time. Some people notice that a breakfast with eggs carries them more steadily into the morning. Others find that adding eggs to lunch or dinner brings a sense of balance to the meal. Not dramatic, just dependable. Because this food is already part of so many kitchens, the question becomes less about discovery and more about attention. For years, many people have been encouraged to separate the egg, keeping the whites and setting the yolk aside. It often feels like the safer, lighter choice, especially for those trying to be careful with food decisions. That habit becomes automatic. Egg whites go into the pan, the yolk is skipped without much thought, and the meal still feels like it should be doing its job. What's easy to miss is that the egg was never designed to be eaten in parts. The white and the yolk work together, each playing a role that supports how the body recognizes and uses the food. When only the whites are eaten, the meal still provides protein, but the body may not respond as fully or as smoothly as it does when the egg is whole. Some people notice they feel less satisfied or that the meal doesn't seem to carry them as long. This shows up in everyday moments. Breakfast feels complete, yet hunger returns sooner than expected. Energy dips arrive earlier, even though nothing obvious was missing from the plate. Whole eggs tend to feel different. The meal feels more rounded, more settled, not heavier, just more complete. Over time, these small differences matter. Daily choices repeated quietly shape how the body responds, especially when it's already becoming more selective about how it uses nutrients. Choosing the whole egg isn't about making a dramatic change. It's about allowing a familiar food to do what it was meant to do. And when decisions stay simple, they're easier to keep. This is where protein begins to feel confusing. The plate looks efficient, the portion seems right, yet the body doesn't respond the way it once did. That's because protein doesn't work as a single message. Within it are smaller signals that tell the body how to respond. One of those signals is leucine. Leucine doesn't add more food, it clarifies the instruction. It tells the body, in simple terms, that this is a moment to focus on renewal rather than storage. Without enough of that signal present at one time, the message stays faint. Protein may still be eaten, but the body treats it more like general fuel than a cue to rebuild. This is why meals that look identical on paper can feel very different in the body. Timing plays a quiet role here. When protein is spread too thinly across the day, the signal never quite rises high enough to be noticed. Each meal contributes something, but none of them speak clearly. Some people notice this when they change nothing except how meals are arranged. The same foods, eaten together rather than scattered, feel more sustaining. Energy holds more evenly. Recovery from everyday effort feels slightly smoother. Combinations matter for the same reason. Certain foods naturally pair signals with structure. When protein comes alongside elements the body recognizes as complementary, the message lands more clearly. This helps explain why two meals with similar protein amounts can lead to different outcomes. It's not just how much is eaten, it's how the message is delivered. Once that distinction becomes clear, the experience of eating begins to shift in subtle but meaningful ways. This is where many people notice a quiet shift. They haven't changed what they eat, yet when gentle movement enters the day, the body responds differently. It doesn't require intense workouts or long sessions. Often, it begins with simple actions, standing up more often, a short walk, a few steady movements that ask the muscles to engage. Movement sends a signal that food alone cannot deliver. It tells the body that strength and readiness still matter. And when that signal arrives close to a meal, the message becomes clearer. Some older adults notice this without planning it. They take a walk before lunch and feel more settled afterward. Or they move lightly in the afternoon, then notice dinner sits differently in the body. What matters here isn't intensity, it's timing and consistency. The body responds best when signals arrive together, movement followed by nourishment, repeated in a familiar rhythm. This is why eating well can feel more effective on days that include activity. The same meal feels more supportive. Energy returns more smoothly. The body seems more willing to work with what it's given. Over time, these patterns build familiarity. The body begins to anticipate the rhythm. Signals become easier to recognize. And when signals stay clear and repeated, the response becomes steadier. This is often where progress feels confusing. Someone eats thoughtfully, moves regularly, and still feels as if the body isn't responding the way it should. The reason is rarely one big mistake. More often, it's a few quiet disruptors working in the background. Sleep is one of the most common. Many older adults get through the night, but not all sleep feels restoring. Mornings arrive with stiffness rather than ease. Energy feels borrowed rather than renewed. Without deep, consistent rest, the body has less opportunity to settle, repair, and reset. Even good meals and gentle movement can feel less effective when sleep stays fragmented. Another subtle disruptor is how much time the body spends still. A day can include a walk or short exercise and still be mostly seated. Hours pass in a chair, at the table, or on the couch. By evening, the body feels heavy without a clear reason. Small movements spread throughout the day often matter more than people expect. They keep the body alert to its own signals, rather than letting them fade into the background. Then there are quiet gaps in nourishment that don't show up as hunger. Meals feel filling, yet something feels slightly off afterward. Recovery feels slower. Energy feels uneven. These gaps aren't dramatic. They don't announce themselves. They simply make the body less responsive over time. When these factors stack together, effort can start to feel mismatched to results. not because the approach is wrong, but because something small keeps interrupting the message. Noticing these patterns doesn't require judgment, it starts with observation. By now, one idea has likely become clearer. Muscle isn't just about strength or appearance. It quietly supports how the body moves through each day, how energy holds, and how resilient daily life feels. What matters is not changing everything at once. Large overhauls often feel overwhelming and rarely last. The body responds better to small adjustments made with consistency and care. For some people, that begins with noticing how meals are spaced. For others, it starts with adding gentle movement at a predictable time of day. Sometimes it's simply paying attention to rest or allowing familiar foods to work more fully. These choices don't need urgency. They work best when they fit naturally into routines that already exist. Over time, those quiet shifts can make daily effort feel more manageable. Each body responds in its own way. There's no single timeline and no perfect formula. What tends to matter most is giving the body clear, repeated signals it can recognize. If something here felt steady or familiar, you're welcome to carry it with you. And if you ever want calm, grounded guidance like this, you may return whenever it feels right.